What's up guys, ZiSotto here, and today we're doing the patch notes review for patch 4.9, Untitled Chapter. This is the release patch of Daji. As usual, we're gonna talk over the balance changes for the god, then look through the skins and stuff quite briefly, and then talk more about the balance changes for items and other gods. Let's begin with Daji herself. Daji is gonna be an assassin. She's from the Chinese pantheon, and her kit revolves around making people suffer. Her normal card art is this. Her recolor is this. Which is not fully loaded, which is great, but you get the idea. I don't know why it's not fully showing. For a passive, which is called Torture Blaze, she basically just gets a dot on her basic attacks. Whenever she hits someone with the basic attacks, they will bleed for 2 seconds, 2 ticks basically, every 1 second. I'm not sure if there's a 0-second tick as well, so if it's a total of 3 ticks or 2 ticks, but I think it's 2 ticks. And these bleeds stack endlessly, so if you keep hitting an enemy quickly, they will have more bleed stacks. The initial damage of that, without any kind of item or anything like that, is just, well, basically 4 flat damage, but then it scales up as well over time, which means that in its initial state is completely negated by Mark of the Vanguard, and then, yeah, basically, over time could potentially out-damage Mark of the Vanguard if you have enough damage to back that up, considering that the enemy will also have protections. I don't know how far it scales though. And one is called Horrible Burns. This is also this is a basic attack steroid that also comes with a dot. In this case, it deals instant bonus damage though, and then additional tick damage, much higher tick damage for 3 seconds. Also every 1 second. And this tick seems to also come with a normal basic attack bleed on top of that. So it's basically 2 ticks running at the same time. And the initial bonus damage is quite a fair bit higher. That in itself is, well, not a crazy ability obviously, but it allows you to attack cancel. The second ability is 1000 cuts. This is probably, along with the ultimate, the most bloated ability. It is some sort of movement speed acceleration / dash. You have to imagine a bit like attack style wise, it's kind of like Amaterasu's ultimate, but it has a different type of movement, so you can control it much better from what it looks like. Meaning you can easily chase people down, but also easily hit people that stand in place. The movement speed increases ridiculous, it's more than 100, so you will be able to chase quite well and use this as an escape as well. This ability does damage on 4 different strikes over 2 seconds. These singular hits also all apply the bleed. They're not basic attacks, but they apply the bleed from the passive. She also gets slow immunity and slow cleanse, obviously. And she gets damage mitigation for attacks from behind. So you don't really want to be facing her because then you take the damage. But if you attack her from behind, she's also going to take less damage. So quite a few things going hand in hand here, I would suppose. Her 3 is Spirit Link. Spirit Link is quite straightforward. It's a teleport that functions style-wise similar to the Loki ultimate. It's just a teleport on a target, but you can teleport to allies as well as enemies, which is kind of nice. And it does not deal as much damage as a Loki ult by far. It's a relatively low damaging ability with a potential to be interrupted because it's rather slow. The initial animation is rather slow. And it also does not have any sort of CC tied to it. So there is no soft, no hard CC in her first 3 abilities. This is worth keeping in mind. The CC comes in with the ultimate, the Pao Lao. This is very hard to describe. Basically what happens is Daji becomes CC immune. She gets on top of a totem, is probably untargetable from what it looks like. So this totem comes out of the ground, it would block your movement as well from what it looks like, and you're above everyone. And then what you do is similar to Ram Snipes, you shoot enemies from up there. But what you do is you shoot them with chains that attach to them, and after the ability runs out, not if you cancel it early, that doesn't matter. After the ability runs out, it will pull all the enemies that you chained in. So this is mostly like Ares, but you have to specifically aim for the targets that you want to pull. You can't pull 5 people all of a sudden, but with a blink or play or anything like that. and as such, it works very differently. It's good team setup. It's interesting, and those chains can be beadsed or CC immuned just by cleansing them at any point. So if you use beads, even if you just got chained, you will not get pulled. The chains immediately break. So not as effective as Ares chains in that regard as well, where you have to time the beads properly. At the same time, obviously, you can try and bait someone's beats. If you just chain them last second, they might not be able to beat, or if they think they might be the ones getting chained, and they might preemptively beat. So there are a few tricks that can work here theoretically. Her kit, I would say, overall has some interesting perks. I really like how the 2 works and everything. The strange thing for me is the complete lack of synergy between the abilities, apparently. Like, yes, you can combine the ultimate with the 2 and the 3, but that's kind of to be expected. Also, with the 3 only it works when they basically stay in place. Otherwise, the damage will also only go to one target, because the circle of the 3 for the damage is very, very small. The 2 can obviously be hit on multiple targets quite easily, but the 1 is a single target basic attack steroid, and it feels a bit out of place. It's too early to say how strong she will be overall, because we don't have the damage values yet. But I am not too worried yet, unless her numbers are completely out of control, because of the lack of synergy between her abilities. With that, let's move on to the other new skins. We've got Stone Sentinel Camazots, which does look quite nice, kind of like a gargoyle. Then we have Nebula Medusa, which is basically the space Medusa version. Then we have a ninja skin for Kuzenbo, which is not a tier 2. It actually has its own voice pack and animation, though I feel like it looks very much like a tier 2. Then we have Jingwei's tier 2, which I think looks very good for a tier 2. It's a lot of changes in that one, and a very nice style overall. And we have Ganesha's mastery skins, gold and legendary and diamond. So those are the skins. We can quickly go through the voice packs. There's always the warning here. These might be very loud when I play them now, so maybe turn on your speakers a little bit.
We are stone by day and warriors by night. That is the way of the gargoyle.
All right.
Your planet will be swallowed whole.
Killing the wrong target happens.
So that's the voice packs. And with that, we're going down to the emotes. We got Dodgy, Clap, Wave, and Camazot's Dance. And there will no longer be an immediate unpause and ranked, which is actually quite nice. So what would happen is people would vote for pause and then accidentally unpause if the pause just went through. So that can no longer happen because there's a 3-second timer in between. And just a glitch regarding the standings on the season ticket. Stone of Binding basically gets an indirect buff because many banishes and slows did not apply the passive of Stone of Binding. And same with Runeforged Hammer, many slows did not apply that passive either. So that gets buffed as well, which is quite nice. Then there's a fix for Ganesh, which is really minor. This gameplay balance thing, I will talk about this without reading all of this out. So Hi-Rez kind of considered to go with some other changes from what they originally planned with the XP change that was announced last patch. They did not want to change the values for Ogres because that might just change the overall XP available on the map too much. They did not want to change minions hitting at different times in middle just yet because it may mean some other changes. And they're looking for that kind of stuff more around the mid-season changes. And they are considering that kind of stuff to happen eventually. Plus, they allowed spectate on PTS, which will mean that pros can play on the PTS, have their scrimmed spectators by their coaches, and that way they'll be able to actually maybe see a little more how good or bad changes are. So what will happen next patch is the XP needed from level 1 to 2 will be decreased. And then the levels afterwards will require you to get a little more XP, which means that everyone gets the next level after the wave. Is this good? Is this bad? Or after a single camp as well? Is this good? Is this bad? I think it doesn't really change too much. In many regards, for many players as well, things will stay the same because the snowballer doesn't really change. What changes now is instead of invading a duo, you will just try and steal a full camp instead of invading the smalls, you'll try and steal the full camp if you get pressure, because you now have 2 abilities to do that, and you can just go for damage abilities if you get the push and you don't need your escapes right away. So depending on the character, this, you know, may actually help them more than anything. It's just different characters that are going to snowball now from how it feels like so far, because in the end, the early clear is still super important, and even more important now, the wave clear especially, now that you need the wave clear in order to hit the power spike first, and those gods who don't clear that well early kind of suffer from that. So, overall, I don't think this was the kind of way to go. I know that a lot of pros did not like this change, and we'll see. Gold Fury and Paul Demons also get adjustment. Gold Fury's base gold value gets decreased and her health gets increased, so she's a little harder to do overall. Paul Demon just gets his gold value decreased, meaning he's less there for the gold and more really for getting that portal. Taking that objective a little bit off the map as a trade-off for Gold Fury in that regard. So, worth keeping in mind. And that brings us to the item changes. Markov then gets a nerf for the flat damage reduction. This is reduced from 5 to 4. This may not sound like much, but it's actually quite impactful. Over the course of a match, the ticks and everything are all going to be reduced a little less. This, I think, is a good nerf because of Mark of the Vanguard just overperforming in general and flat reduction just being such a strong value. So I see this going in the right direction. Chronos Pendant gets a buff, and I'm not surprised at all. Chronos Pendant gets an increase from 60 to 80 magical power. The thing with Chronos Pendant is that it's super expensive, and it is focused around CDR when you have some CDR, but it also has 20% CDR still, obviously. But it didn't really bring enough to the table compared to other items when you took the time to compare the values once. With this power increase, it is actually a fair bit better, especially as a late game choice. In regards to how much it does for early game, I would still say that's debatable. Simply because it's such an expensive item to build early on, and especially Spear of Desolation is just usually better stat-wise if you're looking for very expensive choices, whereas like cheaper choices like Dynasty Playtime obviously have a whole different level of impact early on. I would probably still not recommend building this early on, though I will say I will look into the numbers in more detail and come back with an absolute verdict on that at a later point. Emerald Mail gets a buff, just giving it some more health, allowing it to be built a little more effectively, which is actually quite decent for anyone looking to build items in that tree. So, decent buff here. Gauntlet of Thebes, on the other hand, gets a nerf. It goes down from 400 HP to 350 HP. The nerf is significant, you know, it's still 50 health. I will say that because of that aura being so strong, I do not think that we'll see any less of it, though. I think overall. Especially because the risky part of it is more like building the tier 2 and everything, and yeah, we got that. So I don't see it as much of an issue. Stone of Foul, Stone of Never Bought, gets a price reduction of 100. I still think this item could be good on some mages if you're just facing a very heavy burst like a Poseidon or something. But generally we don't see it much. Maybe a little more now. Tiny bit. A little bit, step by step. Thousandfold Blade gets a 5 power increase. This is quite effective because often you will be stuck on Thousandfold Blade, especially if you're looking for Stonecutting Sword. So this power increase is very nice for anyone who's looking for items in that tree. I would say that is a decent buff. And now we have a very, very interesting buff here. Shifter's Shield. Reduced power from 40 to 35. Increased passive bonus physical power from 20 to 35. So instead of a total of 60 physical power at full stacks, at full health, you now get 70 extra power. In addition, reduce the physical protection from 20 to 15, and that both for the physical and magic protection, the base protections on this item are going to be weaker. However, increase the bonus protections from 20 to 35. That means if you get below 50% health, you will actually get up to 50 extra protections. This is more than Spirit Robe offers around the same price range. And Spirit Rope does not offer you power, it gives you CDR. I think this is a very drastic change, and for certain characters, especially those who can heal up a little bit or work well on lower health, this is quite impactful. And, you know, knowing that Pon liked this in a Thanatos build, I'm not questioning where this change originally came from. I think this will allow bruiser builds to be a lot more effective. Thinking anything along the lines of say Spirit Rope, Titan's Bane, Shifter's Discord build, or anything like that. Maybe even getting in Masamune on more characters in this Thanatos there. Simply because of the ridiculous amount of protections this will offer you the moment you get low. And especially if you combine this with Spirit Rope will take the initial hit in terms of damage due to its passive, if you get CC'd, while you still have power. And then if you get low enough, you'll just switch over to Shifters and you'll be fine. Because you have even more protections then. And that brings us to the God changes. Cernunnos. Shift of Seasons. Decrease power scaling on summer heat from 20% to 10%. Good. I don't know why that had so much damage. Good. Bramble Blast. Increased cooldown from 13 to 15 seconds. Also good. Is that gonna put him out of the meta? I don't think so. As far as I know, this is as far as I recall, his one can still apply item effects even with a summer heat, like Brawlers. Bramble Blast is still a very strong zoning ability, very easy to confirm. It should be often enough for like wave clearing as well. I'm not, 2 seconds should not be that terrible. Obviously, hard clearing early game hunters will give him a little more of a hard time, but I don't think, especially with his ultimate being the same thing and his dash being super fast, I don't think he's gonna take a hard hit here. Chang'e. Chang'e gets a nerf. Wounded Ward's cooldowns are being increased from 20 to 12 to 20 to 14, so it just doesn't go quite as low anymore because she has been pretty much overperforming, so no one should be surprised here. She's been high tier for quite a while now, and yeah, now she's getting hit. Moonflower Dance gets an increased cooldown from 10 seconds to 12 seconds, which I think is quite significant, considering, healing and all. What I am surprised about here is that these changes come like shortly after the Shield of Regrowth nerf, which I think already hit her a fair bit, because the changed stats don't help her quite as much. But overall, I think she's not going to be trash because of these changes. It's going to put her a bit more in line. I think, like, for example, Cernunnos is still going to be a lot stronger than her now with these changes. Along Shen gets some buffs. I'm surprised that he actually gets buffed because the meta is not against him. The meta shifts towards Death Toll solo lane warriors. It shifts towards Mark of the Vanguard, shifts towards Mystical Male, which he all makes good use of. Well, what we got here is base power increase from 38 to 39. That's not crazy. But the attack speed per level from 0.8 to 1 is a decent bit of extra attack speed. Those base stat changes often do a lot. I told you this with Hou Yi, that shouldn't be undervalued, and Hou Yi suddenly sees a lot more play than he did. So it's not coming out of nowhere. And yeah, I think this could give Erlingshen even more pressure, and I'm not quite sure he needed that. Guan Yu, on the other hand, has been struggling, and that is why I understand that this change is coming. Whereas Will gets extra 10% scaling, just a little more damage, a little more danger from that. Otherwise, well, probably considered one of his weaker abilities by most. It just synergizes well with other abilities. Talu Assault gets a protection reduction scaling. So the protection steal goes up from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. And this is important because it's not only implies something for team fights, but it is the first ability you max in most situations. And as such, it will allow you to pressure the enemy a lot harder because they lose those protections while being in the minions if they happen to be close to you. Or while you hit anything, basically, you'll have a longer time of more damage with your basic attacks or your warrior's will that you can follow up with. So quite a significant buff for him there, and I think that's going to be very, very strong. Hades. Hades has been very strong lately. I think this nerf is coming too early. I think usually I am happy when nerfs come relatively early, but especially when you look at Cernunnos and how long he's been overperforming. Hades has a lot more potential, but people have kind of forgotten how to play against him as well. They've forgotten his counter picks and all that kind of stuff. And as such, I'm surprised he's getting such heavy nerfs after this buff. His death from below gets 2 seconds extra cooldown, meaning he can escape less. He can use it, like he cannot use it as an escape and engage at the same time, because it's not going to be up. Shroud of Darkness gets a decreased cooldown. This is a little buff here, so some more focus on the utility. Just 1 second per rank. Though you rarely, I mean, it can happen that you can use it twice, but, you know, not that often, depending on how the target's positioned or if somebody died or survives or whatever. And then Devour Souls, decreased magical power scaling on the detonate heal from 15 to 10%. I think this nerf alone would have been more than enough. I think this nerf is very justifiable. His heal was just a bit too strong. But this nerf alone could have been it. Didn't need anything else. Well, now Hades is getting a fair amount of nerfs, and I don't know if we'll see that much of him anymore. But he still had some good buffs before, so hey, we'll find out. Odin gets a buff to Gangn's Smite, some more damage on that, up to 30 more damage at the highest rank, 10 on the first. And the second swing of this ability, because there's 2 swings, will also potentially, will slow now. Not crazy, I don't think it does too much for Odin. Obviously, a little bit more damage early. Be careful around Odin early at all points, and you should be fine usually. And then, last but not least, there's ZiSotto. Typhoon gets major nerfs. These are weird. So the Typhoon Vortex strength is reduced from 115 to 88. I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean. If it's the radius or if it's the power, or I think it's the radius, but like the Vortex strength sounds very weird. The more important point here, however, is the second part. Reduce the strength movement speed penalty of targets affected by the Typhoon from 40% to 10%. If you were stuck in the Typhoon earlier, if you drop down the Typhoon and somebody is stuck in the Typhoon, they are stuck. They're not gonna get out of there before that thing goes off, unless they have some sort of mobility, some sort of immunity, anything along those lines. Now, it's a joke. And the weird thing to me is that it's just not what this ability represents visually. You have a Typhoon and it's got to whirl around you and suck you in, and it's just like a mini slow. Whereas Anubis grasps out some hands that wiggle from the ground, and they will slow you for more than that. So, weird decision in that regard. It's literally just like a small movement speed item that you're taking away, like a Hasten Fatalis or something. It's less than boots. I see why the slow was too strong, but I don't see why it was nerfed so drastically that it kind of takes away from any logic of how Typhoon would work. Rather, I've seen like some range decrease on the ultimate or something. But the change allow players to have faster movement and help them escape quicker from the pull of the Typhoon. Yeah, I guess. The Typhoon has always been like heavily targeted when it comes to ZiSotto nerfs. I feel like most ZiSotto players don't really play around it that much anyways. This becomes an issue for them, but it will obviously hit them. And with that, we've covered all of the patch notes. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to click that sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow whenever the PTS is up. I'm going to play some Dodgy. Duke Sloth, out.